Hi everyone, my name's Kate. I'm a speech pathologist in the child health team at your local community health centre in Brimbank. Our centre is in Sunshine and I work with a group of other allied health therapists, like an occupational therapist and a paediatric psychologist. And today we would like to talk to you about how to help your child at home during this difficult time, but also beyond that in general, and how to help them with their talking or their comprehension. So, helping your child's language. I will be talking today about what to do if you have worries about your child's language, some ideas to encourage your child's language at home. Some of these things you might already be doing, but there might be a couple of new things or some ideas that you could add. I'm going to talk about tips for parents to encourage communication. I'll talk about talking in everyday routines, talking during play, book sharing, songs and rhymes, and a little note about screen time. I just want to cover something before we get started on tips. My colleague Alison King has just put on another workshop, another presentation, and it's about typical speech and language development in children and when to seek help. So if you are worried about your child's talking or their understanding or their speech, I encourage you to watch Alison's presentation on the Library Talks, because it gives you a bit more information about what's a good time to seek help and where to seek help in Brimbank. I will cover really quickly a couple of things that I do want you to do. If you are worried, please arrange a hearing test. You can organise a speech pathology referral. There are a range of services, but if you want to ask a few questions about what services we offer, you can contact our intake on the phone number that I've added there. There's also school-based services, because we only see children up to school age. And they're private speech pathologists, and you can find those on the Speech Pathology Australia website. Firstly, though, talk to your nurse, your maternal and child health nurse, or your GP, and if you're really concerned, you can arrange a paediatrician referral. So let's get into it. Tips to encourage your child's communication. My most important and my biggest tip to you is to be face-to-face with your child. I know it sounds very straightforward, but there are so many times during the day when we aren't face-to-face with our children. We're busy cooking, driving, doing something else, tidying up, and we're talking to our children and we aren't actually face-to-face or at their level, or we're just talking to them at our eye level, but they're down on the floor. So the first thing I'd like you to think about is making sure that you get down to your child's level and you make sure that they can see your face and see your mouth. It helps children feel heard and listened to, and that they've got your attention, but also it gives them more information in terms of you modelling talking to them, because they can see your face really well. It also helps with turn taking. If you want to talk to someone, an adult, it's much easier to have a conversation when you're face to face at the same eye level. The next point I made is to look at what your child's doing or what he or she is interested in, and notice the ways that they are communicating with you. Your children may be talking, they may not be talking yet, but you can still look at the way your child's communicating. For example, if they're using gestures, you might notice that, or facial expressions, or they might be saying some words. So what I'd really like you to think about is responding to your child's communication when they do communicate. You could repeat what they said if they're talking, and add a word. For example, I've used an example here. Your child says dog, and you say, yeah, it's a big dog. So you're repeating back what your child says, and you're adding a word or words. If your child's using gestures, you could copy what they did and add the word. If there's something fell down, you could say, oh, fell down. More tips for you to encourage communication are that if your child uses gesture, as I said, copy and add to the word for it. If you can't understand what your child's saying, if they're a bit unclear, I want you to interpret what they're saying. So have your best guess at what they are saying by looking at what they're doing or what they're looking at, and then say the words that they would if they could, or that you think they're saying. For example, if your child says dad-a-tar. You say, oh yeah, it's dad's car. So you're actually interpreting for them and repeating the correct way back to your child. I want you to pause a lot more. So sometimes in the rush of things, or when we know children are having trouble talking, we fill the gaps. But what I'd really like you to do is try and pause. So, for example, in my example of the fall down, what I want you to do is, oh, and expect that your child might say it. And if they don't, you say, fall down. And then wait and look like you want your child to say something. Doesn't matter what age. Try not to ask a lot of questions. This is a really big one. I'd really like you to try not to ask what's this or what's he doing or what's that, because it doesn't keep the flow of conversation going. It's a closed question often. So what I'd prefer you to do is make a comment about what your child is doing or what they're interested in. For example, in this example I've got the pictures, you might be saying more cups, oh, more, uh-oh, crash. And then pause, because it allows your child to hear the words that go with what they're doing instead of them being tested. Sometimes children feel tested when they're being asked lots of questions and they may not be able to answer the question. I want you to try some simple questions, like choice questions if you need to ask a question. For example, do you want an apple or banana? So you're actually holding up the object for your child. You can model lots of different words. For example, we tend to at first use a lot of labeling. So you'd be saying lion or you'd be saying dinosaur. But I'd like you to try and get in lots of different types of words. Oh, crash, or hungry. So describing words, location words. Think about using a lot of different words when you're modelling words for your child. When you're saying words or phrases for your child, I want you to talk at a similar level to them or just above what they're saying. So, for example, if your child's saying 2 words together, then you could add, when you say it back to them, you can add another couple of words or 1 word, rather than doing a big long sentence when your child's doing very short ones. For example, if your child says no cheese, you could say no more cheese, so that you're just adding a little bit for them. But I do want you to use the correct grammar. We really don't want to be modelling clipped sentences or missing words, because we want your children to have really good language models. Make out the words you're showing your child. Make sure that they stand out. And the way that you could do that is by using your voice, gesture, and your facial expressions. For example, if your child says he running, you could say to them like, yeah, he is running. He's running. So that they're getting a model and it stands out. Also use gesture. Always use your hands to help you and your facial expressions, and it helps children to notice the words. And my last point on there is repeat, repeat, repeat in a natural way. For example, I've got some children doing Play-Doh with their mums in this picture, and I was thinking about how to do lots of repetition in a natural way. And these children might be rolling, and you might say, yeah, you're rolling. You're rolling your Play-Doh. Roll, roll, roll. Oh, now I'm rolling. And you've said roll, roll, roll many times. So some tips about talking in everyday routines. I love the idea of talking in everyday routines, because we can do it so many times without setting aside any special time, especially when it's you've got competing demands in your home. What the first point I'll make is that it's good to set aside time for talking and listening to each other, and it might be at meal times or bath times, or even a moment when you're able to give your full attention to your child. Talk about what your child is doing. For example, if in that picture the mum's pulling the jumper over the little girl's head, and you might say going over your head, or in the bath you might say something, oh, you're washing your face. I'm going to wash your feet. Oh, they're very dirty. If you can, I want you to try and let your child help you with daily activities, whatever is possible in your home, like cooking, folding, washing, gardening, that's appropriate for your child's age. And you can do lots of talking at that time. Oh, you've got my sock. Or if you're gardening, for example, yeah, that seed goes in that little hole, just in that little one. If you go for a walk or a ride, talk about the things that you're seeing. There's often interesting things that we see when we're out on walks, and it's a great opportunity to pause and stop and have a look and have a chat. Like, look, there's a yellow digger. Wonder what it's doing. Have a little talk about that. Talking while you play. Play is a brilliant way to encourage talking. Joining in your child's play. Following your child's lead. So actually letting them be in charge of the play and trying not to tell them what to do. It's really important, and it helps their communication and their play skills. So a few ideas are to comment on what your child's doing, like we've talked about today, rather than asking them lots of questions. And pretend play is great for communication because there are so many things we can talk about, like having a tea party, putting Teddy to bed, using a pretend shop. And you don't need any particular things. You can just use empty boxes to set up your pretend shop, being doctors or patients, and using all the language that goes with that. I also like the idea of using things in your house to play, especially at this stage when we're home a lot. Things like making a tent with a sheet, putting it over chairs, or making a cubby out of cushions, or doing something like turning a table or a washing basket upside down or turning a table over upside down and using a washing basket as a ship or a pirate ship. So you doing a lot of talking around that pretend play. Now I'm going to talk about sharing books. So many of you will already share books with your children, and that's fantastic. I would encourage you to choose books that have big pictures, not too many words on each page, and ones that use repetition and rhyme. I like the idea of allowing your child to join in and using books as a bit of a toy rather than just reading to your child, using it as an opportunity to have a conversation around the pictures in the book rather than just the words. So my tips here are be face-to-face when you're with your child, so make sure that they can see your face when you're reading. You don't have to read the words. You can make up your own story or just talk about the pictures. And in this example, this car's going really fast. Oh, look, there's a bird in that tree. Use interesting voices when you can to tell the story and keep it fun. It's always great to do character voices if you're telling a story, or just make your voice stand out when you're commenting on things in the page. Use your actions so your child can join in. For example, it's flying, look, up, up, up in the sky. Help your child understand new words by pointing to the pictures and doing the actions. And it's really great to read the same book over and over again so your child learns the words, but also so that they become familiar with the pictures and can tell you parts of the story. When you think your child might remember the next word, it's a great idea to wait and see if they can. If they don't, then you just say it for them. For example, we're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a... and see if they say big one. If your child is able to answer some questions, you can ask them a few things as you go through. Like, what happened? What did that caterpillar have to eat? Or where did they go on their adventure today? So think about what your child's level is, and you could ask them a couple of questions to think about the book after. Songs and rhymes. Many of you are doing songs and rhymes. It's a great idea to sing with your child. It doesn't matter what you sing. Nursery rhymes are great, but also, any songs. Pause in familiar songs that are very repetitive and see if your child can sing the words that follow, like twinkle, twinkle, little, and pause. Share some nursery rhymes together, as I said, making up some funny or silly songs together, doing actions with the words, and make sure you go slow. I notice in a lot of situations we sing our children's songs very fast, but I'd like it if you just slow it down to almost half time. So it gives your child a chance to join in, but also to learn the words and use the actions. Screen time. This is a tricky one. I've put up a little note saying during COVID, you may need to be more flexible with your screen time. And this is very true. Everyone's in a different situation. But normally, the recommendations for 2 to 5-year-olds is no more than an hour a day. And that's WHO recommendation based on really good research. The reason we say that is because the screen, for a number of reasons, the screens can be overstimulating for children, not necessarily educational. They certainly don't provide a way to help your child communicate because you don't get a response from the screen and it's not actually a two-way communication. So if you want to help your child with their talking, I recommend keeping screen time pretty low to under an hour in a day. With an adult watching or playing or supporting your child. Role model, one of the things that's really important is role modelling healthy screen habits. It's tricky, but actually switching off your phone and TV during dinner is a great way to model lower screen time for your children. Balance screen time with other activities like active play, pretend play, drawing and conversation. And also checking the safety and the privacy settings on your phones because that can be an issue around child safety online. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how to encourage your child's communication, there's a great website called Raising Children's Network. There's also Speech Pathology Australia, and they have some tip sheets that might be helpful for you. And there's also a website called the Hannon Centre, and if you Google Hannon Centre tip sheets, there are some tip sheets for helping you communicate with your child's communication. And so I will wrap it up there. I hope there are some new ideas for you. Please get in contact with us. We'd love to see you, and all the best with your child's learning.